Coming up on this episode, a few more names floated as potential targets for the Warriors via trade or in free agency this offseason, and the one that might make the most sense in a Jonathan Kuminga sign and trade scenario. Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. Hope you're all having a good week. It has happened. My wish has been granted. We've got a Game 7 of the NBA Finals. How exciting it's going to be. Unbelievable first time, obviously, since 2016. I think it's only the fifth time this century, maybe. We'll forget the 2016 one as Warrior fans as best as we can moving forward here, but it's obviously going to come up quite a bit in the next couple of days, in the next 48 hours before Game 7 gets underway in Oklahoma City. I still expect the Thunder to get the job done. They will go in heavy favourites, but I expected them to get the job done on the road. Yes, I had a mate who goes to the Thunder actually come around, and tell you what, he brought the champagne. He was ready to pop it in my face, and by halftime, he just had to quietly put it away. And it was a bit of a weird performance from Oklahoma City, and I think I went into it thinking that they were going to get the job done with Tyrese Halliburton's calf strain and the reported nature of that, and the fact that if it was the regular season, he'd be out for multiple weeks. I was actually pretty impressed by how Hallie looked. I didn't think he was that hampered by the injury whatsoever. I think you look at that play in the second quarter where the Pacers really built the momentum and almost killed the game, where he had that steal, obviously, and then threw it into Siakam and did the no-looker, which was completely needless, but just added to the players. Siakam threw it down. And you look at that and you think, this is not a guy that's trying to protect himself from a calf strain. Like, he's going all out. I think earlier in that quarter, he had another one where he almost dove out of bounds to save a ball and steal it as well. So Hallie looked pretty good. And from the Thunder's perspective, they did their best version of the Warriors in these situations in playoff series where you kind of know you've got a game up your sleeve. You can go back home and win it. We saw what the Warriors did in the first round against the Rockets in Game 5, where they obviously had that 3-1 lead, could have closed it out, and came back to bite them. They then lost Game 6, and obviously Game 5 was an absolute nightmare. They found themselves down 30 early in the second quarter. They obviously had that one in 2022 on their way to the championship in Game 5 against the Grizzlies as well, where they lost by near on 40 or whatever. So I don't know. I think the NBA Finals are a different beast. You don't want to be playing with your fortunes too much in that regard. And I do wonder how much of this was the Thunder thinking to themselves, well, we're going to be favourites anyway back in Game 7 on our home floor. I don't think that can be the case. There is no way that can be the case. Now, does it come into the subconscious mind a little bit? Maybe when you know you've got another opportunity available to you, maybe subconsciously you don't dive on the floor for that loose ball. Maybe you don't go as hard for that rebound as what you otherwise might. I don't know. I think that might just be human nature, but it's going to be interesting to see whether or not that has a lagging effect, whether or not the Pacers can really take the momentum now and steal a victory in Game 7 and steal what would be a remarkable championship. And I say the word steal because it still feels a bit weird to me that the Pacers are in this position, that they're going to be Game 7 of the NBA Finals, potentially winning a title. And I don't know, maybe that's me disrespecting them and disparaging them in a way that's not very fair, but it's also just how I feel. Like I'm shocked. And I think it's disappointing that, from a Warrior perspective, not to sound too arrogant and thinking that the Warriors could have rolled the Thunder in the Western Conference Finals, but I do think that this was a major opportunity for Golden State that went begging. As flawed as their roster was, there was a chance that if Steph hadn't done his hamstring, then obviously could have beaten the Timberwolves, might have beaten the Timberwolves, and then could have given the Thunder a run. And then the Pacers, they're a good team. They are a very good team. They play hard. They play a really good team-first style, move the ball. It's fantastic to watch, but they are not some juggernaut by any means. And the Thunder are right now look pretty gettable. Like, they're showing some signs of their inexperience. Chet Holmgren's been pretty disappointing, it must be said. Jalen Williams went from absolute feast in Game 5 to absolute famine in Game 6. So I don't know. It's a bit disappointing from a Warrior perspective, and it's going to be. I hope. I know I said pre-series that I thought the Thunder would win, but I hope the Pacers win Game 7. I think that would be absolutely extraordinary. I don't think it will happen, but I hope it does. and it would be one of the more shock NBA championships in recent memory, it must be said. So looking forward to it. Again, from a neutral fan's perspective, all I want is a close game. I want both teams to come out, obviously play hard with it all on the line, and hopefully we get to a position 2-3 minutes to go where it's a one-possession ball game and it's all on the line. So looking forward to that one. Let's get into some Warriors discussion here. I listened yesterday to the new episode of the Warriors Plus Minus podcast. Any new episode that those guys drop at the moment is kind of must listen with all their, not necessarily intel, because a lot of this stuff they spoke about yesterday was just them speculating and potential hypotheticals and whatever else. But I do think when those guys speak, there's a level of legitimacy to these discussions. And so I just wanted to go through a few names that they mentioned and a few teams that they mentioned as possible teams that the Warriors could trade with, and obviously players within that. So the first of all, with Anthony Slater mentioning the Boston Celtics as a team to monitor for the Warriors over the coming weeks and even months, seeing what they do with their payroll situation. Obviously, in a bit of a bind at the moment with a huge payroll, but not necessarily going to be in contention next season, given the Jason Tatum torn Achilles injury, which is obviously devastating. But it could open up an opportunity for the Warriors or another team to potentially capitalize and acquire a player here for maybe a little bit cheaper than what you'd think, simply because Boston are trying to get that money off their books. And Slater and the guys specifically mentioned Derek White and Kristaps Porzingis as the two guys that the Warriors could potentially target. The issue here is like those guys still make $30 million. Like Derek White starting a new 4-year, $118 million deal, and Porzingis is on the final year of his contract making 30.7. So how do the Warriors actually meet that mark anyway from a contract perspective? I think it's going to be fairly difficult. And therefore, I'm not sure entirely those guys are realistic, not just beyond like they can reach that mark from a salary standpoint, but then are they wanting to pay Porzingis $30 million on an expiring contract? Like, is he the guy for them with his injury history? I've spoken about the fact the Warriors in the Western Conference, they don't really have any leeway to have a key player be out for half the season. Like, they don't have that. Like, to make the playoffs next season, they are going to have Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, and potentially whoever this fourth piece is, whether it's, they bring back Kuminga or whether it's Porzingis or whoever it may be. Like, they need their key guys that are going to be making 20, 25 plus million playing 60, 65 plus, 70 plus games. Like, they cannot not afford to have, particularly if you're Porzingis, and you're coming into a position that's so uncertain in terms of the Warriors and their big man position. Again, they cannot afford Kristaps Porzingis to be out for half the season. Therefore, are they going to be really willing to make that trade? I have some queries about that. And in terms of Derek White, it's a bit different because I think the Celtics are probably only going to be giving up Derek White if you give up multiple first-round picks. And particularly further down the line, like that could, if the Warriors came to the Celtics and said, here's salary and 2029 and 2031 first round picks for Derek White, I think Boston might actually be interested in that because they do need to get some money off the books and because those Warriors picks are pretty appetizing. But as I said the other day, and I think in the latest podcast, that there's part of me that thinks Joe Lacob's not going to give up those future picks unless he's getting like Giannis Antetokounmpo in return or someone who's like an absolute franchise cornerstone. As good as Derek White is, and he'd be very helpful for the Warriors, he's not that kind of player. Like, he drew some all-star buzz this season, but I think he's that rung down from all-star level. He's a very, very good player. Don't get me wrong. I think he'd fit perfectly in the Warriors system, averaged over 9 3-point attempts last season. Chuck him in the backcourt with Steph, obviously a very good defender as well. So he would be very, very good for the Warriors. But is he that like franchise cornerstone piece that Joe Lacob's going to be like, yeah, I'm happy giving up my first round picks when Steph Curry's 41 and 43 years old? I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. And if you're not offering those, then I don't know what Golden State could potentially offer, because I think there's probably a chance with Porzingis that if you're willing to help the Celtics out a little bit, then they're probably not going to get that much in terms of helping them out, in terms of reducing their salary. I think they're not going to expect the world for Porzingis. They're not going to expect for too much. But I still think Derek White is at that age level, his durability, that they are going to ask plenty for Derek White. Otherwise, they're just going to keep him. They're going to find a way to keep him and make other minor moves elsewhere. You'd have to blow them away with a big offer for Derek White, just like I don't think the Grizzlies were interested in trading Desmond Bane necessarily, but Orlando came to them with his offer that they couldn't refuse. And it also helped them from a salary perspective with now being able to renegotiate and extend Jaren Jackson Jr. Well, again, same thing with the Celtics. I think they're not necessarily actively looking to trade Derek White by any means, but again, because of their financial situation, they might be open to it if you're willing to put up a really strong offer. So certainly a team to monitor, but still those guys are at contract ranges where it's difficult to execute, obviously, while you're keeping Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond as well. A couple other names that were mentioned. Bobby Portis was floated again as a potential target. Again, I don't think he's a free agent option. He's a sign and trade option, maybe. But then again, like, you're going to have to give up probably Moses Moody, again, is the most likely candidate in a Bobby Portis trade. I'm not sure if that's doing much for you. I don't think it's moving the needle too much. I'd probably almost just prefer continue investing in Moses Moody's on a team-friendly contract, 3 year, $37.5 million. I think I'd probably just stick with that. Dante DiVincenzo was an interesting one for me as well, which Kawakami brought up as a potential option. Sorry, it's nearly 8 a.m. in the morning here, and it's a bit of a struggle. Anyway, Dante DiVincenzo. Now, he brought him up as a target, but the more interesting thing to me, and I want to read this quote because it was kind of bizarre. It got me thinking. Kawakami said, "There's some people he, as in DiVincenzo, probably wouldn't have wanted to be back with who are no longer on the team." So that's referring to guys that were on the team at the end of Dante DiVincenzo's first year with the Warriors, where he then opted out and became a free agent and obviously left to the Knicks. There's players on that team he wouldn't have wanted to be back with who are no longer on the team. So I was looking at the rosters, obviously, from these years. So there's 2 players who were on the team with Dante DiVincenzo in 2022-23, played the following year, but have since left. And that is obviously Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins. So is Kawakami suggesting, I don't know, I'm just going investigative here and thinking, well, who are those guys? Who are the players that Kawakami is referring to in terms of guys that Dante didn't want to play with 2 years ago, but may be interested in, he might be interested in a Warrior reunion now because those guys aren't there. I suppose Klay is the only one where you can point to and say, well, Klay was probably eating up some of Dante's minutes, right, and taking some of his three-point attempts. And as a result, now maybe he's more open to a reunion. But this was all speculative stuff more than anything. I just thought that quote in itself was particularly interesting. And I don't know, maybe, yeah, I've got no idea. Something to do with Klay, I'm assuming. But I don't want to speculate too much. I just thought it was a weird comment to make, but obviously he's in the know, like he's got intel, so that's come from somewhere. But in terms of Dante as a player, look, his future is a little bit uncertain again this offseason because his contract is so valuable that he's at a point where he's very valuable around the league because of that contract, but he's not a superstar player by any means, so it's not like you're absolutely clinging on to him with all your dear life. And therefore, in any of these blockbuster trades, he becomes like a valuable second piece. We saw that in the Cat trade, obviously, before this season started. And then the KD stuff around Minnesota continues to percolate a little bit. Like, I think it's probably less likely now because KD has come out, reportedly, according to Shams, doesn't want to play in Minnesota. And therefore, that probably lessens their desire to make a trade. But if they did make a KD move, then I think Dante would be part of that. If that were to happen, maybe the Warriors could get involved as a third team. I'm sure Phoenix could probably do with him, though, if they were to go down that route with a KD to Minnesota trade. The other alternative is if Minnesota have real strong priority in re-signing Naz Reid and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, then maybe the Warriors could knock on the door and say, hey, we're happy to give up a pick or something for Dante. The Warriors have this, well, I mean, he doesn't even fit into the Kyle Anderson trade exception. So again, the contracts would be hard. Like, you'd still have to give a contract up to Minnesota, and then that's not really helping them financially. So I don't see a world in which Dante DiVincenzo becomes a Warrior again, unless they can somehow wiggle their way into a multi-team deal that sends KD to Minnesota. Because I don't know why Dante would be on the table otherwise, unless it's because they really want to prioritize bringing back Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and therefore they have to get off Dante. But then it's difficult for the Warriors to necessarily not, like, they can't just take Dante off the books and not give up salary going the other way. So I don't know. It's difficult, but Dante's a player that we know fits in the Warrior system. As Kawakami said, would be a perfect third guard, potentially coming off the bench behind Steph and Pods, I suppose. If you're looking at that kind of player, I'd just re-sign Melton or not re-sign Melton because he's no longer on the team, but try and bring Melton back on a minimum contract and take a risk in him as like your third guard, or potentially even has the capability to be your second guard, as we saw very briefly at the start of this season. So that's what I would prefer, because you're giving up nothing. It's much less from a salary standpoint. Yes, you're taking more risk because of his injury history, but I would much rather take that on than give up a legitimate asset for Dante DiVincenzo, who is on a very valuable contract, but it's still $11-12 million. Like, it's still more than the vet min. And obviously that plays a big role in the overall payroll and where the Warriors are going to be at in terms of the first and second tax apron. All right, the last name, and I think the most important name that I want to get onto here, because this is starting to gather some sense and some steam, and the stars are starting to align somewhat on this kind of move. Again, there's been no strong reports that this framework is in the picture, but you can see why it makes sense. And that's Kobe White, and it's a Jonathan Kuminga for Kobe White sign and trade. So to me, again, the stars are kind of aligning, because you've got reports that Chicago are interested in Jonathan Kuminga as a restricted free agent. Obviously, they've got their own restricted free agency problem with Josh Giddey, or not problem, but equation to figure out, and paying Josh Giddey the big bucks, maybe a well over $100 million. That's definitely going to be the case. Probably around $30 million a season. And I think they're in a situation where they probably don't want to be paying Josh Giddey $30 million and Kobe White $30 million when he becomes extension eligible or becomes a free agent next offseason. So that in itself would suggest to me that they would have interest in this kind of deal. And from a Warrior perspective, look, I don't love it. I don't love the fact that you'd be sending out a 6'8" forward for another smaller guard who has question marks defensively. But what the Warriors do need is a legitimate third scorer, third shot creator to try and ease the burden on Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler next season. Those guys are going to be 37, 35 years old, presumably going to miss time during the regular season. You need a guy to step up in those scenarios. And Kobe White is more proven at that than Jonathan Kuminga. And he would also, with his shooting ability, 37% this season on high volume, he would theoretically be a better fit alongside Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green than Jonathan Kuminga would presumably be, based on what we've seen and based on what Steve Kerr has done in terms of benching him late towards the regular season. So if the Warriors look at this and think, to me, I still think Jonathan Kuminga can be a better player than Kobe White, a more impactful player than Kobe White. And from that perspective, it's a bit dangerous, but I could see the Warriors saying to themselves, all right, we just don't think this can fit. We do not think Jonathan Kuminga can fit. Let's get a similarly talented, similarly youngish player. I know White's 25, Kuminga's 22, so there still is 3 years age gap there, but it's not like you're going out and getting a 30-year-old. It's not like you're making a deal with the Bulls for Nikola Vucevic, which I've spoken about before. If they traded Kuminga for Vucevic in a sign and trade, Lord have mercy. Like, I would be ropeable. That angry. Anyway, I don't want to talk about. In fact, it's a good thing that those guys just getting off the White topic for a second. It's a good thing those guys on the podcast yesterday kind of reported, I suppose, cooled interest from the Warriors in Vucevic. Slater certainly said that after the Butler trade, when the Vucevic deal was still potentially on the table, they certainly cooled on the idea of that. And then Marcus Thompson went a step further and said basically it wasn't as if they loved Vucevic. It was more so he was the best option at the time, which is essentially what I was thinking as well around the trade deadline, is that, hey, I'm not a huge Nikola Vucevic fan. He has his flaws, but the Warriors were so disinteresting at the time that I just wanted a change of some sort, and getting this veteran stretch five who's averaging 20 and 10 and shooting 40% from three, like that's a change. And that's what I wanted. And so I was kind of for a Vucevic deal from that perspective before they obviously landed Jimmy Butler. So it's kind of a good thing, I think, that they don't have as much interest in Vucevic as what we probably think. And maybe some of it's been overblown a little bit, and therefore they clearly don't value him to a point where he's going to be the main asset coming back in a Kuminga sign and trade. So I think that's very, very good news for Warrior fans. But in terms of Kobe White, I could see the Warriors saying, hey, we just don't think Kuminga fits. Let's get this guy who can be the third guy for us offensively, but can also be an effective third. Like, the issue with Kuminga is he can be your third scorer, but you've got to give him enough opportunities as the prime, like with the ball in his hands as the first guy, in order to get that kind of thing. As Kobe White's like, no, he can be the third guy, and then in moments where we need him to step up to the first or second guy, like then we can make that happen, kind of thing. He can make that happen. I think, again, with his shooting ability, makes that a bit more of a cleaner fit alongside. Now, what happens to Pods in that scenario? Does it lead to more three-guard lineups? Potentially, and I think that's a problem, and the Warriors still have to, work out their size issues and trying to find more shooting in the front court. So I'm not saying Kobe White's the absolute perfect target by any means, but what I would say is that I don't think I've heard another realistic trade target for the Warriors in a Kuminga sign and trade where it's just Kuminga going out, right? Because most of these other guys that you would want are $25, $30 million players, and therefore you're having to add Moses Moody or another contract to make it happen. Or like if it was a Derek White, you're throwing in multiple picks, right? So that's the issue with the fact that obviously only 50% of Kuminga's next contract counts as outgoing salary in a trade, is that it's very difficult to find a player who the Warriors would be interested in, who's valuable enough to say, we're going to say goodbye to Kuminga. You look at the guys making less than $15 million, unless it's a guy first to 4 year, who is probably not going to be available on a rookie contract, then who's it going to be? Like literally the only one I can think of that is realistic, that is a team that would have interest in Kuminga and I think would theoretically have interest in this kind of deal, is the Bulls and Kobe White. It's the only one. If you guys can come up with another one, like a clean, straight swap, Kuminga for someone, no picks involved, no other contracts involved, a straight swap, who is it? Let me know who it is, because I don't think there's anyone else where I, as a Warrior fan, could say I'm okay with this deal. I'm not thrilled about it. Don't get me wrong. Giving up Kuminga for Kobe White, it doesn't thrill me, but I think I could point to and say, yeah, that I can get why they did it. That makes sense. Like giving up Kuminga for Vucevic, I'd be like, absolutely not. Like that makes no sense to me whatsoever. So let me know if there's another player out there that you think is worthy of doing a straight Kuminga sign and trade swap for. I think Kobe White might be the only one, the only solution. Otherwise, you're going to have to get more complicated with, and we know this is probably what's going to happen in terms of sign and trade, but you're going to have to throw extra contracts in. You're going to have to throw picks, whether that be on the Warriors side or another side. I don't really want to be bringing in picks like if it's Kuminga and you're getting a lesser player back and you're getting picks involved, unless you're pretty confident you can use those picks in another bigger deal. I don't really want to do that. But, whether it's a multi-team trade, we saw obviously the Warriors flip Clay into Buddy Hield and Kyle Anderson in what worked out to be a 6-team sign and trade. So there could be something brewing. there could be something brewing. But in terms of just the most simplistic one-for-one swap, Kobe White, as Kawakami said on the podcast yesterday, he is the level of player, just quote, the level of player we're talking about that is gettable for Kuminga is Kobe White. Again, I think Chicago would probably do it because they'd probably look to themselves and say, okay, we can pay Kuminga 25. He's a front court player. We're going to pay Giddey 30, at least 30. We don't want to, we'd rather pay Kuminga 25 than Kobe White 30 plus and have $60+ million in a backcourt per year. That is, they're decent players, but I don't think anyone's saying that's the greatest backcourt in the league and you're paying $60+ million for it. So I could see Chicago going for it if they're really interested in Kuminga. And the Warriors, again, it doesn't thrill me, but it makes some sense. And I can understand that just given Kobe White's ability to be a shot taker, shot creator, a shooter, handle the ball and play make for you, does a lot of different things offensively. Very, very good offensive player. Like he just is. 20 points a game, reasonably efficient the last couple of seasons. I could understand that. But let me know what you think about Kobe White as a potential option for the Warriors and whether you would do just a straight swap Kuminga for Kobe White. Whether there's any other names out there that you think the Warriors should be targeting in a Kuminga sign and trade, or whether you think it's probably got to a point where just bring him back. Just bring him back. There's probably no one out there that's realistically available. Look, we've still got a couple of weeks here to determine what could happen. So I'm sure there's a few different things in the pipeline. We'll wait and see whether or not the Warriors are truly interested in pulling one of those off, or whether they'll, as has been widely reported, it's more likely that they bring Kuminga back at least until he becomes trade eligible next season. Therefore, all his salary can count as outgoing in a trade. I'm going to finish it up there, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POC252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. Thanks to all of you that are listening via your podcast feed, as well as support is very much appreciated. Looking forward to a big Game 7 on Sunday, US time, Monday morning. My time in Australia going to be up. And looking forward to that one again. I think the Thunder are going to win, but I will probably be going for the Pacers on the road. Until next time, guys. Thanks again.